Imagine, if you will, your friend lies dying. His injuries are mortal. There is no rescue, no salvation, no hope, only death.
Hello everyone, TardisGuy123 here, and today I am reviewing probably the most anticipated release of this year from Big Finish. It is of course the 6th Doctor, The Last Adventure, as you can see in front of you, and well, it is finally Colin Baker's heroic exit from the part, and he will continue playing it of course through Big Finish, but this is sort of like telling the story of his regeneration at last. Far too long there had been jokes about him falling off an exercise bike or bashing his head on the console, but now we have a story which actually provides a proper regeneration while not overriding the events which happened in Time and Rani. And of course the story goes that Sylvester McCoy donned the wig for a couple of seconds and played the part of the 6th Doctor and then regenerated into the 7th, but at last Colin Baker gets to properly hand over the reins to Sylvester McCoy after, well, over 30 years of waiting. So yes, let's dive right into what we have here. It is of course presented in this wonderful book-like format. I really do love this. It feels so high quality and worthy of the 6th Doctor's final story. And there he is right there, the man himself. You've got the TARDIS right there, the Valeyard, who plays a very important role in this box set, and it also provides a conclusion to his story, or at least that's according to Nicholas Briggs in the Doctor Who magazine, if you pick that up. And there we also have Mel, of course, and then you've got Flip, Constance, who is the new companion, who will actually be debuting properly this month in Crisscross. But for now we have her here in this box set after when she joined the Doctor, but released before. And there you have Charlotte Pollard, or Charlie, and then you also have Jago and Lightfoot right down there. And you sort of like got the space station, which was used for the 6th Doctor's trial way back in Trial of a Time Lord. It doesn't play too much of a role in this, but nevertheless it's nice to have it there. And there of course you have starring Colin Baker, Trevor Baxter, Christopher Benjamin, India Fisher, Lisa Greenwood, Michael Jaston, Bonnie Langford and Miranda Raisin. And then Big Finish, We Love Stories, and you've got a nice sort of like vibrant 80s feel going on here with the cover, very reminiscent of the 6th Doctor title sequence. Let's pick this up now and take a look on the side here. You've got the spine there with Doctor Who, 6th Doctor, The Last Adventure, and then the Big Finish logo down there. On the back here you have all this fun stuff, limited special edition, including a behind the scenes disc and a stunning array of specially taken photos of the cast. And we will have a look at all that in a second. But anyway, you've got Doctor Who, the 6th Doctor, The Last Adventure, directed by Nicholas Briggs right there. You've got two nice pictures of the Doctor and the Valeyard there. And the stories included in this are The End of the Line, which is written by Simon Bernard and Paul Morris, The Red House by Alan Barnes, Stage Fright by Matt Fitton, and The Brink of Death by Nicholas Briggs. And it is the limited edition. My number is 1854 of 10,000. Your one will no doubt come with a completely different number, but yeah, that's just my one. And then on the side here as well you have the same thing, except this time it is of course in the book. So let's take that out now, if I just get rid of that, and it's the same cover as on the front pretty much, no real change there. And on the back there is no real change there, except all the stuff at the bottom has now been removed and replaced with Big Finish, We Love Stories. So that's all very nice. Now let's take a look inside this. You have a wonderful image right at the start there, and there is disc 1, The End of the Line, and I am a Time Lord who's out of time, with the 6th Doctor there, wonderful image. And then if we open up, you can see disc 2, The Red House, and the discs just come out like so. Trying to damage anything here, but yeah, there is one of the discs. I just push that back, and they're all pretty similar, but yeah, that's just that disc. And now if we put that back in there carefully, and then we'll continue on in just a second. this back in there. Here we go. And now I'll just open it up, and then you've got a special introduction by Colin Baker right there. Then turn the page again, and we have another image there with the regeneration happening. It's far from being all over, and that's the second page of Colin Baker's introduction. And then you have a wonderful bit right here with some characters from the end of the line and writer's notes on the end of the line. Once again, characters from the Red House and Red House writer's notes. Stage Fright writer's notes and characters from Stage Fright. And as I say again, the Brink of Death writer's notes and characters from the Brink of Death. And then if we open up on the next page, you've got producer's notes from David Richardson, and you've got a nice image of the Valeyard there. And once again, here we go through some cast images. Right here with the Colin Baker, Miranda Raisin, India Fisher, Lisa Greenwood. Turn the page again, you have Colin Baker and Michael Jaston staring off against each other. Turn the page once more, I can just get this right. Michael Jaston and Bonnie Langford. Some assorted cast members, I believe these were all from the Red House. Then you've got, of course, the Jacob and Lightfoot gang with Trevor Baxter, Lisa Greenwood and Christopher Benjamin. No, Lisa Bowerman, sorry, I didn't mean to say Lisa Greenwood there. But here you have Michael Jaston, Bonnie Langford and Colin Baker, and yeah, that's the final image. And you've got production credits, cast and whatnot, and then you have a very nice image of everyone right here. So yeah, that's all very good. And then there's the back here, disc 3, Stage Fright, and then I might as well show you, well actually it's just the same image but on that disc there, and then here is the behind the scenes disc, and that's just the back there. So then, what are my thoughts on The Sixth Doctor, The Last Adventure? Let's take it story by story, naturally enough, and start off with The End of the Line by Simon Bernard and Paul Morris, two relatively new writers to Big Finish, and they have done a wonderful job here with The End of the Line. It is a very mysterious story. Basically, the Doctor and Constance arrive at a train station where a train has stopped, and there's sort of like a fog coming down and people are getting lost in the fog, and strange things are happening in the fog as well, and it is all very mysterious and a lot of fun. And at first you think it's going to be one thing, but soon it turns out it's something quite different, and it's a nice twist on that whole thing, which I really like. And this story is probably the most surprising. It probably includes the most fun twists with the reveal of a certain character who I won't say, but it is a very shocking thing, and I was not expecting that at all. But anyway, let's talk about the characters in this. Of course, you have Sixth Doctor, who is played wonderfully by Colin Baker. He's sort of like got a brashness to him in this story, and you know, but at the same time, you know, he's still lovable. He's still very much his Big Finish self, but he's very much trying to be in charge of these characters and trying to save them. He's not just being in charge for the sake of it, he's being in charge because he knows that he's the one best qualified and knows that he can save these people, but they're just being very stubborn and whatnot. So that brings out an interesting side to his character. And then Constance Clark, who is like introduced here in a way. Obviously we haven't heard her in anything else just yet, but here Miranda Raisin is wonderful in the role. It's hard to really talk about her character without knowing too much, but I must say she is quite good in this. I do enjoy her character with her interactions with the other characters, and she's sort of like got a bit of a headstrong nature to her, but not in the same way that Flip does. She sort of like still is quite, she definitely thinks things through, I think Constance does, and you know, very much wants to be treated according, well, not according to rank, but you know, she wants to be called Miss Clark. You know, she's sort of like got that not old-fashioned sentiment to her, because obviously old-fashioned for her is new-fashioned, I guess, if that makes sense, because obviously that was the way it was back in the 40s, but yeah, that's all very well and good, and I think she is just quite an interesting character, and be interested to see how she's introduced and how she ends up working with the dynamic of the Sixth Doctor, because here it's a bit hard to tell because it's thrown in right in the middle, and for the actors as well it was thrown in right in the middle. It hadn't recorded crisscross yet, I don't believe, so that is quite interesting as well, and they do have a very strong dynamic. You sort of like feel that, which just shows how good actors these two are, despite not getting to build it up right from the start, instead of getting chucked in the middle, and they still work very well together. So that's very good. And then other characters in the background, they sort of like all have something to hide in a way. They've all got something interesting going on eventually. And even the characters which you just feel sort of like boring background characters ending up having a twist. And there are sort of quite terrifying scenes. And the scene where the story really gets going is where this character sort of like goes over the edge, and I can't remember her name actually, but she is a very good character, very well played by the actor who plays her, and you know, it's really annoying that I can't think of her name, but she is a Ms instead of a Miss. That's all I can remember about the character, but yeah, she is a very good character. And then Norman is sort of like the headstrong one who is often butting heads with the Doctor for being in charge, and he's quite a good character, quite annoying at times, but when you get towards the end of the story he can become quite interesting again, so that's all very good. And then you have Tim Hope, who is sort of like the one who's working with the Doctor the most, and sort of like working with Constance the most actually, and he is quite a good character as well. So yeah, it's hard to say too much about the story without going into the spoilery bits, but what I will say, it's a lot of fun. There are some great twists in this, and it is very much disconnected from the rest of the box set. I'd say that it's slightly a flaw. The Valeyard does play a very small role in it, sort of like a cameo. You sort of like get a hint at where he comes from as well. That's very nice. But at the same time, you know, it's very much the most standalone of the box set, and as such ends up being quite a lot of fun at the same time. So yeah, overall I will give the end of the line, I will give it a 9 out of 10. So that is my thoughts on the end of the line. Now we move on to The Red House, which is a story which features Indiana Fisher as Charlotte Pollard, and also features werewolves, or werewolves, whichever one you prefer. But yeah, basically The Red House, I was expecting it to be one thing and then end up being another, and when I read it at first, sort of like having a planet full of werewolves, that quite intrigued me. I was quite intrigued as to where they were going to take that idea, where Alan Mance was going to go with it. But then we heard the trailer and we got the line werewolves in uniform, werewolves on wheels and whatnot, and then I started to think, huh? What? I was a bit confused about that. I was sort of like, it sort of like ended up in hinting that it was going to go in a completely different direction to what I thought it was. And yeah, when I listened to the story, it did end up going in that direction, unfortunately. It wasn't sort of like the gothic horror, strong werewolf stuff that I was hoping for. I was sort of like hoping for The Red House to be sort of like a house where these characters are trapped and you've got a base under siege with a planet full of werewolves coming at them from all sides. That's what I was hoping for. We ended up getting something very different. The Valeyard sort of like comes into play here, although not quite. He's sort of like lurking about in the background, manipulating things, and very much is involved with Charlotte Pollard, sort of like tricking her and whatnot. That's all very good. Michael Chase is of course wonderful in the role, and you get some very nice bits of dialogue between Charlie and the Valeyard, and there's some wonderful things going on there as well. You sort of like getting to see him manipulating characters. That's all very fun and that's all very good. And then at the same time you've got sort of like this other story going on which isn't quite as interesting. That's the whole werewolf thing, where you've got this twist on the werewolf story, which is quite an interesting twist. But at the same time, once you get past that twist, there's not really much going with this story other than that. And while you have an interesting moral dilemma and whatnot, it doesn't really live up to what it could be. And yeah, I'm not too fond of the whole take of where these werewolves ended up going. I'm not too fond of them speaking too much and how all that ended up being portrayed. But yeah, I think, well, it's an interesting twist. It's one that doesn't really go anywhere once you realise what the twist is. And in fact, Alan Barnes said that himself, and that is why he decided not to use it in a 2-disc story, but rather when this one presented itself as just a 1-disc, 1 hour long story, he decided it'd be good here. Well, I don't think it would even be good for that. I think it would have been best utilised in an anthology story, you know, where you got sort of like 4 half-hour stories. That could have been a good half-hour story there, but unfortunately it wasn't, so that's just how it ended up going down. And then of course Charlotte Pollard in this, who started off as a companion of the 8th Doctor and then sort of like ended up with the 6th Doctor through means which I won't spoil for you. I don't know too much about that. I sort of like had to read up a bit of it to understand what's going on here. There are some things you have to understand about Charlotte's character, which are rather unfortunate, because it is the only story which you need to have some background knowledge for, not necessarily having listened to other stories, but having some knowledge of her character. But I have listened to her with the 8th Doctor before, not with the 6th Doctor before, and having listened to her here with the 6th Doctor, I think she ends up going along very nicely with his character. I think they have a wonderful dynamic, which I wasn't expecting, to be honest, because I very much do like her with the 8th Doctor. I think that dynamic works quite well. And while this is a different dynamic, it is still one which works very nicely. So that's good, I think. That's quite nice. And they do get split up quite early on in the story. They go on their separate strands, obviously with Charlotte going with the Valeyard, and the Doctor ended up going with the werewolf storyline for the most part. And then they do overlap when they get to the end. But for the most part, I'd say the story isn't the most intriguing of the set, unfortunately, and I am going to have to give it, unfortunately, a 6 out of 10, I think, is what this story is going to get. So that is my thoughts on the Red House. Some interesting characters in there. I'd say, actually, one thing before we move on to stage frights, is that the constable in this, or is it the sergeant? I can't remember which one's which, but one of them has a voice which is very well suited to werewolves, and I think it's very gruff and very nice voice as well. So yeah, that was a bit of good casting right there, and it is very fitting. But at the same time, you know, I'm not overly fond of the whole idea of the werewolves speaking where they go with it in this. But overall, the Red House, as I say, 6 out of 10 is what it's getting from me. And now we move on to Stage Fright by Matt Fitton. And, you know, this one was just shaping up to be very good. I liked the whole idea of sort of like of there being this show where sort of like different acts are sort of like portraying different elements of the Doctor and whatnot in his past incarnations. That was all very intriguing to me. And then of course it also contains Jago and Lightfoot, who are 2 wonderful characters first introduced by Robert Holmes in Talon to Winchang. They are 2 wonderful characters and they shine in this. And then you've also got Lisa Greenwood as Flip, who I heard her first trilogy and fell in love with the character. She is great. She is such a wonderful character, wonderfully played by Lisa Greenwood. And you know, this story just helped that character even more, in my opinion. It really does give a bit of development to Flip and just portrays her as this really good character. I really do love Flip. She is without a doubt my favourite 6th Doctor companion. So yeah, Stage Fright was shaping up to be very good just on the back of all that information alone. And you know, it's very much the story where the Valeyard comes into play properly. He interacts with the Doctor, and there is some great stuff going on here between those 2 characters as well. And you get to sort of like see how shaken up the Doctor is by the Valeyard, and how the Doctor, how the Valeyard keeps tricking the Doctor, how the Valeyard really is playing and toying with him and sort of like just teasing him, and it is all very good stuff there, and Michael Jason does that very well. And you sort of like got the Doctor chasing his own tail for a bit and just getting really in the fluster about all this. He really is getting angry about the Valeyard and sort of like thinking it's all his fault. That is all very good. And you've got sort of like Lightfoot and Jago and Flip sort of like trying to convince him that you know, it's not his fault, but the Doctor's sort of like convinced that the Valeyard is him in a way, and sort of like, of course, the Valeyard is a distortion of him, or we don't get the full details, and the full details aren't really revealed in this box set either. We do sort of get a possible explanation in the Brink of Death, but personally I don't believe that. I think that was just sort of like a ruse, a trick there. And yeah, those are my thoughts on that whole thing about holding the identity of the Valeyards. Do I prefer it to remain a secret? I don't know. I think maybe I would like it to be explained at one point, but at the same time, you know, it's sort of like the whole mystery is the whole thing going for the Valeyard, and once you get rid of that, it could possibly ruin it. But yeah, nevertheless, Michael Jason is wonderful in Stage Fright. It is probably his best performance of the box set, and of course he really does give his all into this and does some interesting stuff, and it's quite a dark story as well. There are some quite dark things going on with the Valeyard, sort of like the way he's killing these people is quite interesting as well, and that's how Lightfoot gets involved, of course, and Jago gets involved in the whole theatre aspect of it. So it all comes together very nicely in this. And then Flip, of course, as I was saying, has some wonderful character development in this as well, which I was not expecting really, because it's an hour-long story, and it's part of the box set which is focusing on the 6th Doctor and building up to his regeneration. You've got the whole Valeyard thing going on, you've got Jago and Lightfoot chucked in there as well, and yet Flip is still given a good amount of character development, and it just shines through in this story. She really does, and I think Matt Fitton has really written well, probably the best story of this box set, and it really is a great story. And Jago and Lightfoot themselves in this, you know, sort of like, you've already got most of the supporting cast already, because you've got Jago, Lightfoot, and Lisa Bauman as Ellie Higson, so you've got most of them there already. You just have some other supporting characters to fill in, but they're not really sort of like proper characters for the most part, although one of them does have quite a bit of development as well, and sort of like a twist to his character. And it is amazing how Matt Fitton is able to fit all this into this 1 hour story, and yet still it ends up playing very well. And you know, you don't feel that it's overfilled at all, you feel that it's done perfectly. Jago and Lightfoot do sort of like take a back seat in it at some points, but you know, that's to be expected, and it doesn't really feel like they've been forced to. It just feels natural for the most part, and that all flows very naturally. And then Ellie also gets a good amount to do in this as well. She gets some good bits of dialogue, and then of course it all comes down to this confrontation between the Valeyard and the Doctor. And you know, both Colin Baker and Michael Jason pour their heart and souls into those performances right there. It is a great little scene there going on, and it's probably the best moment of the box set. And you know, I was kind of hoping we'd have another one in the Brink of Death, sort of like a big face-off between the two. And while there is one, it's just not as well written and not as investing as this one. And then you've got Flip as well, sort of like intruding on that conversation and really just showing her character very well. And Flip is just wonderful, I can't say that enough. And of course, Jago and Lightfoot also are very wonderful characters too, and actually so much so that I have picked up Jago and Lightfoot Series 9 just because I want to hear more of those characters. And it all just comes together in Stage Fright. It really does. And you know what? I am going to give it a 10 out of 10. I was thinking giving it a 9, but on my second listen I just couldn't think of much wrong with it. It just truly is a great story. So those are my thoughts on Stage Fright. Now we move on to the final part of the story, the Brink of Death. And admittedly, it did help from a second listen. When I first listened to Brink of Death, which is written by Nicholas Briggs, I thought, it's okay, I guess. You know, but I thought it was a bit too timey-wimey, there was a bit too much stuff going on, and you know, I wasn't overly fond of it as an end to the 6th Doctor. But then on second listen, once I sort of like knew what to expect from it, I actually ended up really enjoying it and thinking, why was I hating on this so much the first time? It's actually a very strong story for the Sixth Doctor to go out on. However, it does have its flaws. One of them is Mel. Now, it's not that Mel's an annoying character at all. I actually quite like the character, especially at Big Finish. I think she's been allowed to expand greatly and become a very nice character. But in this story, she very much takes a back seat, and that is unfortunate. I guess it kind of had to happen. But, you know, given that Matt Fitton has just written a story which incorporates so much into it and works out so well, then you go on to this story, which has less to incorporate, actually, and yet still manages to put Bonnie Langford into more of a cameo, I guess, just sort of like a glorified cameo for the most part of the story. And what annoys me more than anything else is that there's sort of like this hint of that there's going to be a subplot for her when she's sort of like talking to this market stall person. And, you know, I can't go into too much detail about what it's about, but I will say that that is a very nice scene, very well played by Bonnie Langford. And, you know, you sort of like get hints that it's going to go somewhere, but it ends up not going anywhere. And, you know, her character just ends up very much being in the background of this story. So that's unfortunate. And I think just another scene just to resolve that subplot could have worked out, because this is actually the shortest story of the box set. So there would have been time to write in another scene and have that be performed and to just conclude that story, just give a little bit more to Mel. But unfortunately there isn't, so that is probably the biggest flaw with this story for me. However, moving on from that, you sort of like get a substitute companion in this, who is Genesta, and you probably saw her earlier when I showed you the inside. Actually, let's just check again. There she is, Genesta, and if I just go back a couple of pages, you can see her again there in the middle. Yeah, she is a wonderful, wonderful character in this. She truly is. And, you know, it's almost a shame that because of the way the story plays out, she couldn't be a companion of the Sixth Doctor full time, actually, which is very unfortunate. Maybe they could bring help into the Seventh Doctor. I don't know. I kind of think there was such a wonderful dynamic with the Sixth Doctor, and she is just a wonderful, wonderful character. She really does work out very well in this story. She's possibly the best part of it, actually, and you know that's quite. That's not saying anything bad about Colin Baker or Michael Jaston at all, but she truly is a wonderful character and very well written by Nicholas Briggs. So I thank Nicholas Briggs for creating that wonderful character, even if it's just for this story and she sort of like gets a sort of like, she's just a wonderful character, and I can't say too much about her, but she is great and a great creation of Nicholas Briggs. So thank you to Nicholas Briggs for creating that, and thank you to Liz White for playing such a wonderful character who possibly this could be her only story. And you know, part of me would like that. Part of me thinks that's fitting because it sort of like adds to the bittersweetness of it. But at the same time, she is so wonderful. I would like to see her continue on with Colin Baker and do some more stuff with him. And as the story says, the brink of death. It is very much the Sixth Doctor on the brink of death throughout this whole story, trying to unravel the Valeyard's plans before his time is up. That's all very fun, and that's all very good. And, you know, the Sixth Doctor, Colin Baker, very much gives this good performance where he's on the brink of death, and you can really tell that from his performance. He's really trying his best to survive and trying to sort out what's happening, trying to save everyone and stop the Valeyard's plans. And, you know, the only one who's in between him and death is Genesta, of course. And they work together very well, and you have some wonderful scenes in there as well when Colin Baker's sort of like on the brink of death. Obviously, I've been saying the brink of death rather a lot, but it is very much all about that, and the title is quite fitting for that topic. And then you get to the final confrontation between him and the Valeyard, and as I said, it wasn't as good as it was in Stage Fright. Nevertheless, it is quite an interesting confrontation. You finally get sort of like to find out what the Valeyard's plan has been all along, and it ties in the middle two stories of this box set. It sort of like ties together with the events of the Red House and Stage Fright. However, at the same time, it does sort of like leave out the end of the line. I feel there could have been something going on in there to sort of like resolve that thing, because End of the Line very much feels like it's cut off from the rest of the box set, which is unfortunate. Despite it being a very strong story, I feel that there could have been something featured in The Brink of Death while it's tying the other two stories together, just sort of like loop back to The Brink of Death and make it feel like one whole story. But yeah, nevertheless, I couldn't get over that, I guess. But unfortunately, what I can't get over is the Valeyard's plan. Once he's sort of like won, in a way, he sort of like just sits back, and his over assurity that he thinks he's succeeded and he's just letting the Doctor hang on sort of like ends up being the reason for his failure and the reason that the Doctor ends up winning. That's not really a spoiler, because obviously the Doctor always has to win. So yeah, that's sort of like, that does annoy me a bit, how the Valeyard almost lets that happen in a lot of ways, and you know, it doesn't really feel like him, especially given that through this whole box set he's been manipulating everything, and now once he's finally gotten what he wants, he just lets his guard down, and it doesn't really feel right. And sort of like he is very much the reason that the Sixth Doctor sort of like comes through. He could have done something to prevent him, but instead he just lets him do this, and then realises too late that what the Sixth Doctor is up to could endanger him. And then that's it, and then you get sort of like this final scene between the two, which is quite nice, but as I say, not as good as stage fright. But yeah, as a final end to the Valeyard, it is, well, I just feel like it doesn't feel like a final end to the Valeyard. I feel like there's something more that's got to come. It just doesn't feel like a fitting conclusion to his story, and I hope that one day we will get a 7th Doctor story maybe with the Valeyard, so I continue that and continue his reign of tormenting the Doctor, because that'd be quite fun to see Michael Chaston opposite Sylvester McCoy, and yeah, I think that combination would work very well. But now we move on to the topic that everyone's been waiting for, the regeneration itself.
The simple fact is that I'm a Time Lord who's out of time. And the only thing between me and oblivion is you.
So then, what did I think of the regeneration in this story? I think that it was marvellously done by Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy as well. That's where his sort of cameo comes into this, and I can't talk too much about it, but I must say it is very good how that ends up being played together. And it's nice how it ends up building up to that and ties into Time and Rani very well. And you sort of like get hinted at right from the start of this story of the Kershaw and whatnot. And then finally that comes into play properly, and you get to see the 6th Doctor meet his doom, I guess. And you know, it's sort of like interesting how that plays out, and obviously I won't spoil it. I think it has actually been uploaded on YouTube actually, so I sort of edited that together with some images and whatnot as well. So that's quite interesting. You can check that out if you want to, but it will contain spoilers obviously. Nevertheless, it is quite nice how that ties in. It also ties in to explain sort of like how the 6th Doctor regenerated and yet Mel was seemingly unharmed except being knocked unconscious. That's nice how it explains all of that stuff very well. So that is very good, and it is a wonderful end to the 6th Doctor right there. So let's just take this and put it back in its box, as I rate The Brink of Death at an 8 out of 10, I think, is what I'm going to go for with that. It is a very good story. As I say, on second listen, I found it much, much better. That's going to fall over great. But yeah, it is very good. Very fitting end. Nicholas Briggs has done a wonderful story right there. So yeah, I will say that if you did listen to it once and wasn't too fond of it, I will say listen to it again. As always, it's not perfect. It does have that flaw, such as the Valeyard and such as Mel's involvement in the story. But at the same time, it features Janesta, who is a wonderful character, and it ties most of the rest of the box set together and ends up being a fitting end to the 6th Doctor, and the regeneration is very well done indeed. So yes, that is my thoughts on the Brink of Death. And now to conclude the last adventure, Would I recommend picking it up? Yes, I would. If you don't have as much money available, I would say that download is the way to go, because 20 quid is a much better price than 40 quid, even though you do get this wonderful deluxe packaging, which I really do like, and I really do think it's worth it. I just feel that, you know, I'm glad Big Finish doesn't do it that often, because it makes it feel more special for one thing, and also it makes things more affordable as well. And while I do like this packaging, I think that, you know, it's not necessary for everything, but obviously the 6th Doctor's regeneration does deserve something special, so it's nice that we get this packaging used for that. So that is what I think of the 6th Doctor: The Last Adventure. 8 out of 10 is what I'm going to rate it, because it does have its flaws. Admittedly, the Red House isn't the best, and the Brink of Death could be better, and obviously the end of the line could tie into it. Stage Fright, yeah, it does have a couple of little things, but for the most part, Stage Fright is excellent. So yes, that is what I think of the 6th Doctor: The Last Adventure overall. I sincerely hope you have enjoyed this review, and maybe it's persuaded you to pick it up, maybe it's persuaded you not to pick it up, maybe it's just persuaded you to pick it up on download. But anyway, I hope this review helped for everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye everyone.
Constance Clark, how do you do?
Name?
Charlotte Pollard.
Miss Philippa Jackson.
After you, Miss Bush.
The Doctor saves the day again.
My name is Yardvale. Mr. Timothy Yardvale.
Please open the door.
It's a trick. He's lying. How do you know?
No. What? No.